For more than 2 decades, Marjan Mohsenin has been helping leaders navigate one of the greatest challenges of our time, thriving in a world defined by constant change. Based in Silicon Valley, she's an executive advisor, keynote speaker, and leadership strategist specializing in future-ready leadership, emerging technologies, and organizational adaptability. Marjan's journey began at a startup that was later acquired by Kodak, giving her a front row seat to one of the most iconic stories of technological disruption and shaping her perspective on innovation and resilience. She later spent 8 years at Singularity University as Senior Director of Strategy, collaborating with world-renowned futurists and helping leaders prepare for an increasingly exponential future. Today, Marjan is the founder of Marjan Moments, where she helps individuals and leadership teams unlock their full potential in times of uncertainty. She's also the co-founder of Futurepreneur, a Silicon Valley-based community focused on future readiness. Throughout her career, she has worked with organizations including Google, Deloitte, Netflix, Walmart, SAP, Roche, Bayer, Deutsche Telekom, and Anheuser-Busch, empowering leaders around the world to transform uncertainty into opportunity. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Futurepreneur podcast. Today we have another amazing guest, Marjan Mohsenin. Marjan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Kai.
Yeah, it's truly an honor to have you here. I'm sure that we'll have a lot of interesting conversations and things to talk about. So before we begin with all the kind of questions and stuff, I would love to know more about you and what kind of got you involved with the whole concept of futures thinking.
Sure. So what's interesting is futures thinking found me in a way. Is I started years ago, I was approached by a university of the future called Singularity University, based at NASA Research Park out here in Silicon Valley. I live out here in California. And the Singularity was founded by Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis. And it was all about how do we create the types of people that are changing the world and using this through technologies, exponential technologies, meaning accelerated technologies, and convening entrepreneurs and inventors and futurists and subject matter experts and really smart people that were really passionate about starting businesses. And that's Singularity University. That's how I got involved. And what was interesting about this is that when I was approached, I didn't know anything about these technologies. And this is also interesting for, I think, for some of your listeners, is that you don't always have to know what you're good at. You don't have to be like, oh, I have to be a perfectionist in this thing. But here's the thing is I knew it would be interesting. I knew it would be something very new for me, and I knew it would be exciting. And I'm like, I've got to do this. And my particular role was I was working with businesses. So these are global businesses that are looking for how to stay relevant, how not to be disrupted. What do they need to do? How do they get some of that DNA and energy from these founders who were there, these entrepreneurs, where there's a whole other focus in school on training them to bring this into their company. And so it was all about helping these leaders not be disrupted, helping them identify opportunity outside of their line of sight, because this is our line of sight. And then we have these other opportunities that we just don't see unless we're thinking in a different way. And here's an example. So I was working or talking with a large automotive company.
Right.
And their whole thing was, oh, let's think about what the future of the car, like designing the interior of the car. And then we said, well, wait, hold on a second. What about if you don't even need a steering wheel? And what about if you don't even need to be driving? Because we knew that there would be driverless cars. And they were like, whoa. And it was like, phew. And So here we are today, driverless cars here in San Francisco. There is like so many Waymos. I mean, so many of those around here. And we have that. The other example I thought was super interesting at the time was the Future of Finance, massive financial company who were investing millions of dollars in designing the next credit card. What will it look like?
Mm,
Let's put the marketing behind it. And we were kind of like, wait a second. Why do you even need a physical card? Because everything's going to be digitized. People are going to, you know what I mean? People are going to be paying with their phone or paying with their watch. So why would you need to do
right.
that? And that was like a huge awakening. And so that was about disruption. How do we help these companies not be disrupted? And then
Yeah.
laterally, in terms of how did I get into this future thinking piece, I'm like working alongside these incredible founders who are literally creating new products and services that we don't know about. At the time, there's Made in Space, the first humans ever to 3D print in microgravity in space. What is
Wow.
that? Like, what does that mean? The first thing they
Yeah.
printed was a screwdriver. Why a
Mm,
screwdriver? Because astronauts need the tools to fix their equipment quickly. And in order for them to wait to get that screwdriver to fix a part, they would have to wait for a launch from Earth to come up and deliver that. So the fact that they could 3D print this at the International Space Station was huge. And then, so this is where that convergence comes in, Kai. Again, it's like, well, that helps with sustainability because now we're not spending all that money and waiting on this time too of bringing something from Earth up into space, and then that speed of being able to innovate quickly.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that is all very interesting. And, speaking of disruption, I mean, just a little bit of research about you, and you can find out that, I mean, you're one of those people that actually got to experience the whole kind of original Kodak story. I mean, you worked at a startup that was acquired by Kodak. And I mean, anytime any kind of talk about disruption and business and entrepreneurship comes, the original story of Kodak always comes into play. It always makes its way into the conversation. And so, I mean, it's so cool to be actually talking with someone who actually saw it and, was actually experiencing it firsthand. So I would love to know how that whole entire experience was. I mean, how did it shape your perspective today?
sure. Yeah, it's funny. I don't talk about this a lot. Like a lot of people don't know this about me. And that Kodak story that you're talking about, that is a case study that is used in almost every MBA program. Harvard
Right.
Business School talks about the disruption of Kodak. And I literally had a bird's eye view. I was there. My brother co-founded a company called OFOTO, OFOTO. At the time, this was the hottest digital photography company. Now, mind you, I know it's like, wait, everything's digital now. How did it seems like eons ago. It was actually probably 20 years ago at this point. So at the time, you had a digital camera and you could upload those prints that you took from that or those photos you took from the digital camera. You upload it to your laptop or your computer and you share with friends and family and you print. Now, here's the
Right.
thing. We know Kodak's business is they made their billions of dollars in chemicals and printing, right? Printing paper. And
Right.
so the reason that they acquired our tiny little startup was to really increase their digital footprint, right? Makes sense.
Right.
I mean, this goes in so many different ways. So they purchased us. This was in 2001. And we were seeing this crazy trend. So not only were people buying prints, which was what the original business model is, but we had these really smart engineers and these really smart product leaders that were saying, wait a second, we're seeing a really interesting trend. People aren't just buying photos, but they're sharing their prints. We have so many members in the gallery, something called a gallery, sharing their prints. And of course, the business was to get them to purchase, right? And that's what we call like
Right.
the linear business. And so these people went to Kodak and said, hey, we're seeing this really interesting trend that we would like to explore further. And they said, no. Your
Of
job,
course.
right? Your job is to really push and create those channels of selling these digital prints through, print to store, like you go to the store, you pick up your prints, or, print at home or print at home. So people buy the printers. And we were like, so now you see how this is all connected? That was like 20, 25 years ago. They said no. So we're like, okay. So went back to business as usual. And this is just what, oh, it so gets me, even to today when I think about it, is that 10 years later, a little company with 12 employees right down the street here in Silicon Valley recognized that trend and they
Mm.
created Instagram,
Right.
which 100 billion valuation, now acquired by Meta. Meta's what, a $1.6 trillion company. Because Kodak, this is just what gets me. Kodak invented the photography category, but they did not, and cameras, but they did not see this, or they didn't want to focus on that. They wanted to focus on the business at hand, the business at that time that was making money. And that
Yeah.
is where disruption starts. And I have so many more stories, like our logo, like we wanted to change it to a different name, and they were like, no, we're going to change it to Kodak Gallery, which sounds so corporate, So, oh, photo. So the sad thing is, they were disrupted by a startup, which is no longer a startup at the time. And what really got me is that fast forward then 10 years later, see, I didn't have a word for that. I didn't understand at the time what was going on, but now I do, which is why I'm so passionate about educating and inspiring and teaching this, which is you don't want to be like Kodak.
Right.
You don't want to be
Yeah.
disrupted. You don't, and for businesses, whether you're a mid-sized business or a large business, but even for ourselves as individuals, you know. So it was
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah, it's truly insane. I mean, it's kind of funny, but also a little bit, it makes you feel a little bit bitter when you think that an entire company, went down in flames essentially because they were a little bit ignorant. I think maybe a little bit cocky. They were too sure that it would be fine. I mean, it's a little startup, nothing's gonna happen to us. But then, I mean, the entire thing got disrupted and, it got overtaken. And so one thing that I would love to know is what do you think sets apart organizations that kind of ignore disruption or didn't really care about disruption, and those who actually embrace it with like the wide open arms and they somehow manage to thrive? What is like one key difference that you think that they have?
Well, the biggest thing is mindset. So it's understanding. So just stepping back for a second and you mentioned this earlier when you were saying, well, maybe they're a little bit cocky and they were arrogant. It's
Yeah.
assuming that what made you successful in the past is going to make you successful for the future. That is
Right.
not how it works at all. So it's using your skills, your ability, your mindset, which is based on something called linear thinking. Okay. So if I
Right.
can explain for a second. So linear thinking is um, I studied really hard and therefore I'm going to get good grades and I'm going to graduate and I'm going to get a good job and make a lot of money. You see the linear path because this is what worked in the past. And then I'm going to get a great job and then I'm going to have this, this, and this. Or if you're an executive, I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm an expert at this. I've been, creating growth for this company. So
Right.
I'm not necessarily going to pay attention to all of these signals that I'm seeing out there. I'm going to keep running my business as I used to because that's
Yeah.
what I know. And I'm telling you, it's like a gentleman named David Rose, who was an angel investor in Silicon Valley, has a very famous quote, which is, um, what got you for the companies that were successful, and I'm paraphrasing, companies that were successful in the 20th century will no longer be successful going forward in the 21st.
Right.
They don't understand this, and if they don't disrupt themselves. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
and also this is really hard. It's not easy to implement this change within a company because change starts with the leaders and then
Mhm.
you can't an example is you can't bring in an Uber executive into a very linear company that has been doing very well, profitable for years, and is starting to go on the decline. And to think that bringing in that executive into that group is going to change the company. Organizations do that all the time as well. So it really starts with that DNA of that mindset of changing the culture, of changing how they're working, the innovation. I mean, there's so many facets and pieces on that.
Right. And I mean, speaking of change and leaders also kind of always, struggling with that, all of that. I mean, you've worked with such big name companies. L'Oreal is the one that comes to mind immediately. What is one misconception, or can I say, what's one, let's say, error that a lot of leaders and big business people kind of make when it comes to preparing for the future? I mean, other than ignorance or maybe arrogance, what is one other kind of big error that you see them always making, like, consistently?
That they're creating the same products and services that they were creating in the past that made them
Right.
successful, and that they are unable to vision to see the opportunities outside their line of sight. So going back to the credit card company, and I don't like to I don't name specifically because we've been working with them confidentially, but naming that is just like changing their perception and helping them understand to start working and innovating outside the core of the company on, digitizing payments. As now, this is something that we have today. So you're like, you can't even imagine what that would be like. But literally 10 years ago, that was not something that people did. So it's helping them future cast and future vision what is possible. And the way you do that is, again, it's like I call it like doing push-ups with your brain. So I want something else that I want to introduce at this point is that when we think about, I talk about the pace of change, is that we are in an acceleration that is, we are living in the slowest time in our human history right now. And that is driven by the pace of technology. And I think of this as like a hockey curve, like this. And then within this curve, there are a number of little S curves, right? If you think about investments and compounding investments. So when we talk about when everything is massively disrupting, uh, governments, organizations, not only just organizations, but the way we teach, schools, the way that we have been teaching is massively being disrupted as well. Institutions, this is impacting everything. And the reason for that and how that's happening is this acceleration. And I keep saying exponential. So let me give you an example. Kai, if you were going to take 30 steps 30 steps outside of
Right.
where you're sitting right now. You know exactly where that would be in your head because you're mentally counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Down
Right.
the hall. If I were to say, where would you be if you took 30 exponential steps? 30
Voice screen.
because you're going 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and so on. 26
Right.
times around the earth. That's over 1 billion meters.
Right.
But the thing about that is
Mm.
you and I, we can't even understand or conceive what that is. Like
Right.
we can't. We can be like, okay, but we can't sit there and count it like we could 30 steps where we know exactly
Mm.
where that would take us.
Right.
That pace of change is where we're at. And
Yeah.
because of that, because of this feeling that is just like, what do we do? This feeling of anxiety, of uncertainty is literally where we're at now. And so if anybody feels like things are going fast, it actually is. It's going so fast. Which kind of
Yeah.
goes into a separate segment that we're going to talk to about. But you were talking about going back to this, which is what are the biggest mistakes? So there's one thing that I'm really going to hone in on here is that there's always people in the company that don't want change to happen. And
Right.
it
Yeah.
is like, then they are the ones that tend to destroy any external innovation coming in because
Right.
they want, no matter what, to protect the core of the business. And that is
Right.
based on fear. That's based on a fixed mindset, fixed and linear mindset. We've always done things this way. Let's keep doing this way. And we're
Yeah.
seeing this right now, like how AI is taking over, is making its way into almost every single company. And of course, there's fear, but there's a lot of great opportunity with that.
Yeah.
So it's so the way that we design this is companies want to innovate and work on the edge or not necessarily introduce all the big ideas to the company at once because people will shoot down those ideas. Absolutely.
Yeah, they get overwhelmed immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're not going to do it. And then everything goes back to normal, and then that company goes out of business.
Right. I mean, I guess it's kind of human nature to be like scared of change, though. We're not built for such large amounts of change every single day. I mean, at some point, it was a lot slower, and the kind of changes that were kind of taking place weren't as, intense and crazy. And so the world is changing so much. I'm not sure if you're on the side of social media that I am, but I see like a lot of comments on like random posts that are like, oh, 2026 is like the new 2016. Well, people like want to go back in time where they're kind of scared of the amount of changes that we're going through. And a lot of people kind of think like, oh, like I wish we could go back to how things were. And like I want to go back in time almost. And I guess I could say that it's probably because of all, the anxiety surrounding AI and stuff. So what would you say to these kinds of people that kind of say, okay, I want to go back in time. I don't like how things are going so far.
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is that I completely understand. Um,
Right.
I mean, I absolutely completely understand and I empathize with that. We had a global pandemic. I can't even imagine, Kai, being your age or being in your 20s where you want to be out with people and you want to be meeting people and you want that face to face and you're literally not able to leave your house for 2 years. I mean, I'm lucky, I've my husband, my kids, my everybody was here and not a problem, but I mean, I can't even imagine what that feels like. So I get that. The other piece too is, we've got wars going on. We've got all this stuff going on right now. And
Yeah.
as you were saying, what kind of jobs are going to be out there for everybody. So I understand that. And
Mm.
the other piece I would say is, well, what is normal to those people? Normal
Right.
is there's change going on. Even in that normal time, 2016 and earlier, the world was changing because change is constant. It's always happening to us.
Yeah.
But it's always happening. It's just not happening at this accelerated rate. So, what I would say is, listen, we're never going to be going back to the past. We also tend to romanticize the past. By the way, are you
True.
seeing on your social media feed, do you see the whole trad wife? Uh,
Oh my God, yes. I have been seeing it everywhere. It's kind of crazy.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. No, that's crazy. Like they have no idea. So that's the extreme of what you're talking about. Like, oh, let's go back to, where, that's crazy. But
Right.
do you see what I'm talking about? Is that you've got like all of
Yeah.
these people doing these, like, let's go back to where it was, calmer. Um,
Yeah.
so what do I say is listen, this is the new normal. The new normal is uncertainty. And like so when you think about how do you operate in uncertainty, uncertainty is the new normal.
Yeah.
What do? You become adaptive. You explore all this like an explorer, like a curiosity mindset. So you've got adaptability, curiosity, um, more selective in terms of how you're reading and looking at stuff. So I have this whole thing like later that I want to talk about social media. Once you start going down a rabbit hole and that algorithm picks up what you want, it is
Right.
literally changing your brain. Where
Right. Yeah.
people are like, oh, all these people want to go back in time, then I do too, because maybe it was better. So I
Right,
would
yeah.
say change how you think, change what you do. This is like lifting a weight and doing a bicep curl, and you're strengthening your muscle. If you work out and you got to do that every day or 5 days a week or whatever, you've got to do the same thing. You've got to strengthen your muscle here in terms of making these changes on becoming more adaptable, getting out of
Yeah,
your comfort zone. I mean, there's a whole kind of way of doing that.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. Now, the other piece too is there's tremendous opportunity in this as well.
Right, yeah.
You know,
The issue with social media though is that, I mean, also it's like human nature, but like we do tend to focus on more negative things. And once like you just get that kind of negative news, it just kind of keeps coming up. And the thing is, this might ruffle some feathers, by the way. My generation especially, I think we do have a tendency to have like a mob mentality. Well, like if one person says one thing, everyone else is like just saying it back to them like a parrot almost. So if one person says, "Oh, I want to be a trad wife," and it's like, "Why do you want to go back? Women didn't even have rights back then. What are you talking about?" And then everyone suddenly is like repeating that back to them. And again, it's also the same with AI, which by the way, not all am I saying like, "Oh, AI, we shouldn't have concerns." No, all the concerns, all the the nervous people have surrounding AI, it's totally valid, totally normal. But again, people tend to just like focus only on the negative sides because AI, like anything, is a tool. I mean, the internet is a tool. Like, there's a lot of sick, twisted people on the internet. Does it mean that internet's completely like bad? No, that doesn't mean anything like that. It's just like it's kind of like a double-edged sword. I mean, you could either use it, for good things, to positive things, or you could do a lot of crazy things that you wouldn't want to be happening. And so the thing about AI is what I would like to know from your point of view as someone who is much more experienced, is dealing with disruption every single day, is having the talks and everything. What would you tell to young adults and teenagers to focus on instead of focusing on, oh, like what jobs is like AI going to take? Because I mean, yeah, the nerves and everything is valid, but like surely there's a kind of more productive way to spend our time instead of just being very nervous and just very anxious.
I would focus on, well, there's a lot in there to unpack, which is
Yeah.
super interesting. Well, the first is, okay, where to focus? Skills. Forget about
Right.
a career. Forget
Yeah.
about a career. Forget about what your parents, me, my parents did. This idea, which is kind of exciting. Do you see how that's scary and exciting at the same time? Which is
Right.
instead of planning for a career of what am I going to do? I'm going to go to university or college, and then I'm going to do that one thing for 15 years or 10 years. Think
Right.
of this more as what skills. Okay, the future is going to be skill based. Okay, and the future is now. So the way to do this is, first of all, step back, do a digital detox, get off your phone. I mean, really powerful. I have daughters who are in their early 20s, so
Right.
talk about this stuff a lot. Is think about, what do you love to do? What are you good at?
Yeah.
What do you get compliments on? And what do you think you can make money at? If you're not working right now, but you're thinking about this, what do you think you can make money at? And then what if this falls into your life, what do you think the world needs? Um, for instance, when I do this on myself, or when I did this kind of framework and training, I think I care a lot about, different from my day job, I care a lot about health and wellness, and at least in the United States, we have an obesity epidemic. And I hate seeing children who are not active and they're just sitting in their houses in front of their screens. I think it's incredibly unhealthy, which it is. And we're seeing this across the world. So I think the
Yeah.
world needs more healthy people and children, because if children are
Right.
healthy, they grow up, they have less health problems and such. So you
Yeah.
think about that, right? You have this matrix.
Yeah.
Then you think about, and when you kind of step back and do that, instead of thinking about, oh my God, what's the job going to be? It changes how you're thinking in that moment, right? So this goes back to the mindset. Changes how you're thinking in the moment, and you're just doing this thing one at a time, one step at a time. So what are the skills? So, what do you like to do? So focus on skills based. If you're going to college, or university, just think about the next few years, literally. Because what's
Yeah.
going to happen is that if you're going into a field, also, I would do it. I do this with my daughters, or I did it with my daughters when they were working on what they're going to end up studying, is think
Right.
about what are the jobs that AI cannot, that are actually really good at right now. Like I would not
Right.
recommend legal. I would not recommend going into law, for instance.
Yeah.
I would not, anything having to do with finances because AI is really good, and that's where it's doing a lot of work right now in financial institutions. But what are the
Right.
jobs that they can't really do right now? Human-centered jobs,
Right.
interactions, and there's a lot of jobs that are around that. People-centered, interacting, more creative thinking. So think about that. Don't think about a big career. Think about skills. Like, what do I want to do in the next 5 years? And focus on that. Because when you couple that with this adaptability thinking, resilience, the ability to kind of navigate and maneuver like this, kind of like what I've done with my career,
Right.
then something else will present itself as, oh, based on me doing this thing that I've been doing for the last 4 years, or let's say I studied, I see
Yeah.
this opportunity opening up in a new field. So the thing here,
Mm.
Kai, is that there's opportunities, and this is where it gets really crazy. There are jobs out there that you and I don't even know about that because they don't exist, but they will
Mm.
exist. So when these folks change their thinking, they will be on the frontier. They're going to be on the front end of working in jobs. Do you remember when ChatGPT came out? What, 4 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Four
Around four
years
years
ago
ago.
it
Yeah.
came out. It was all like everybody's like, how do we even pronounce this?
Right.
Remember that? And how do
Yeah.
you
It's kind
talk
of crazy.
about
Not everyone is using it now.
everybody's using that, and then it's like, how do we keep our creativity going? How do we not become lazy and just, punch
Right.
it in to get stuff? But anyway,
Yeah.
does that make sense?
Yeah.
Direction?
Yeah, it makes total sense. So basically, it's just to go back to basics instead of, thinking too complicated about like, oh, like what career am I gonna have and to, make it super complex. Because if you do that, then you're going to overwhelm yourself. And I mean, as young people, I don't think necessarily have to know exactly what you're gonna do because there's no shame in like not being a little bit in being a little confused. You don't have to have everything, planned out by the time you're like 17, 18. Like that's unrealistic, especially now, so many things changing. It's not going to do you much good and you're just going to make yourself too anxious and worried. So basically just to think about the skills, become very basic in that kind of regards, and surely the opportunities will arise. And so speaking of all of that and change and stuff, what are things that kind of excites you? Like what is an emerging trend or signal that like is very exciting to you? And what's one other thing that is very concerning that's really has you worried for the future?
I actually wrote down the thing that I'm really excited about because I have stats on this, but I did write them down. So, the thing that really excites me is
Right.
longevity, the breakthroughs in longevity. So the next couple years, be on the lookout for, how we talk about AI? You're going to see
Yeah.
longevity. Longevity and also quantum computing, by the way, that's going to make that accelerate exponentially. Now, what I mean by that is I don't mean, oh, let's live to 150 years old. I mean, we as humans will have the, capacity and capability to live healthier, longer lives. When you think about your maybe, I don't know, grandparents or great grandparents or aunts or uncles, and maybe somebody that has been sick and has passed away, we often focus on the last 5 years of their life and how that's what we think of who they were. So
Right.
imagine that we're eradicating, certain diseases, we're eradicating, Alzheimer's disease, all of that. When I was talking about this 4 years ago, we were still doing this with, testing it with mice, but now they're doing human trials, which is huge. And I want to tell
Right.
you specifically here, I wrote it down. Let me find it. Um, the cool thing is slowing biological aging, which is huge, cardiovascular and organ protection. The idea of slowing cellular age reversal. So this is literally breakthroughs in epigenetic reprogramming. Now, this is right out of Star Trek. Like you see like a whole person going, they're like, and then they come out young. This is wild to me. So these
Yeah.
advancements are coming out. The other part of this that is really exciting are GLP-1s. I believe
Right.
GLP-1s are a game changer in the way that when we eat less, we have less inflammation and we are healthier. And this to me has been a, huge issue, again, going back to that obesity epidemic in the United States, but all over the world. And they're finding what's fascinating right now in front of our eyes, they are finding multiple uses for GLP-1s, habit formation, alcohol addiction, nail biting. Like you can stop
Wow.
biting your nail, right? And all of this stuff is happening in real time in front of us. So very exciting, multi-trillion-dollar industry, and just going to be seeing a lot of advancements in
Yeah.
real time.
Before you continue though, the thing about GLP-1s is I've been seeing like a lot of like influencers, celebrities like getting on them and people who have had health issues with their weight and just the relationship with food and stuff. And one thing that irks me is some people are calling it like cheating. Like, oh, you're cheating. Like, oh, you lost weight with GLP-1? You're cheating. It's kind of weird because imagine you're telling someone who is depressed and they're taking antidepressants and like, oh, you're cheating. So you're taking antidepressants, you're cheating. So I think we also do have to kind of get rid of that, I guess, tabooness almost of taking
Yeah.
medications like that. And yeah, it's amazing truly what, medicine nowadays can do and will continue doing and achieving. So continue. What's one thing that is concerning? Yeah, is
But
concerning.
but back to that is
Right.
but back to that specifically is that again it's rage baiting, it's online rage baiting, of but we do have to normalize this. We just like normalize. It's okay to use a GLP-1 to lose your last 10 pounds, or if you have depression, which is what it will be used for. But do you remember when mental illness, nobody talked about mental health? No,
Yeah, it was like always like very like shameful to kind of talk about it. And
yeah,
if someone went to therapy, then they must be crazy. There's something wrong about them or something like that, which is an insane way of thinking about it nowadays, but it's
right.
crazy. Yeah.
But that's an example too about how far we've come with longevity, that we're able to talk about mental health. And you're seeing, how you see these Olympic athletes who are coming out, I struggled with mental health, and that's huge that they are doing that. So that's an example of something really good, which I'm really excited about. Oh, wait, there's another non-tech part of longevity that is super cool. Have you heard of the Blue Zones by Dan Buettner? The
No,
Okay,
educate me.
the blue zones are these areas in the world, all over the world, and there's a handful of them where people are living, they're centenarians. People are living into their hundreds. So Dan Buettner really popularized this. He wrote a bunch of books about this. He's got a whole, thing around this, which is understanding what are the habits and what are these centenarians doing and what is happening in that community. And now we have blue zone areas cropping up all over the world. And these are all based on your habits, your community, your food intake, your movement, your socializing, all of these pieces. So I love that because that's just an example of non-technology, that
Right.
the fact that we're really focusing on that as part of this whole longevity, which by the way is think of it as health span, not lifespan. It's all about health span, which applies to your age too. How do you
Yeah.
live with less anxiety and less depression, right? We're seeing an
Right.
exponential increase in that in teens and in 20-year-olds for sure. So all of this I think is really going to be helpful. So super exciting.
Yeah, very exciting, truly. And what's one thing that is more concerning to you? Like one thing that you're not so excited about?
Oh my God, I'm social media. It's horrible
Mm,
for kids.
yeah.
Horrible, horrible. And I'm going to tell you, like, and this is going to sound strange coming from me. Like, I don't think kids should have a phone until they're 16, maybe 17 in this day and age, because the amount of, because it's There's a guy, Jonathan Haidt, excellent, who writes all about this. And this lack of experiences, like this lack of connection. And let me explain what I mean by that. People are breaking up, right? You're ghosting each other, you're breaking up via texting. This losing the inability to be able to have a face-to-face conversation and have those hard conversations face to face,
Right.
and have an uncomfortable, when you meet somebody for the first time and you're like, hi, my name is, and having that anxiety and that, excitement at the same time. All of this is being lost. This is just human connection.
Yeah.
What I like, what Jonathan Haidt goes into a lot is when he talks about the loss of sharing an experience, which is, let's say you're hanging out with your friends and you're all going out to lunch, okay?
Right.
And you see something happen on the sidewalk, and you're all looking at that, and you're all having a shared experience. And that seems so tiny, but it's massive when we talk about, connection and, all of these different pieces that are important for us as humans. Now, compare that to going out, everybody has their phone, or you go over to somebody's house. And what do we all do? We're on our phones. Everybody's
Yeah.
having their own experience designed by the algorithm.
Yeah.
It's pushing exactly what you want. And there's also, I mean, it's just social media is very devastating. It's scary. The guardrails are not in place. Kai, we don't have any idea what a 6-year-old who, has a phone, or the parents are giving them all of the different devices to keep them self-entertained, what that
Yeah.
child is going to be like when they're even 12
Yeah.
or 13. The inability for creativity, just be bored. Go outside and be bored and look at the sky. Um, I remember it was I remember being so annoyed when I was like, I don't know, 14 or whatever, and there's nothing to do. All my friends were doing something else, and I'd go outside and be like, oh God, I'm so bored. And I like look at the sky, and then these ideas come to you when you are bored. But now these need to be manufactured. But do you see how I just came up with a business idea?
Yeah.
You see that? How do you help individuals? How do you help teens, you know, uh, go into learn how to be bored? You
Yeah.
flip it. So you flip it. You're being like, or how to do a digital detox,
Yeah.
how to spend
And
a few hours on a Saturday without your phone.
yeah. And speaking of, I don't exactly remember the name, but I think there were like some cafes or restaurants. It was probably in California, I'm pretty sure, where they would like take away your phone as you enter the cafe, where like people would be forced to like have, these conversations with each other and actually like eat and enjoy their time without taking pictures and posting on Instagram and, like being on the phones constantly. And I do agree that that kind of, you know, with social media, we're kind of losing empathy in a sense
Yeah.
that, we don't have these kind of, face-to-face conversations anymore. So you don't really see how your words are kind of affecting the person in front of you. So now when we get online, we just say whatever, and it kind of is causing us to kind of lose empathy because we're not seeing how our words are affecting people. Like people are genuinely forgetting that their words have an impact on people. And that's so crazy to kind of look at. And I mean, you know it's getting crazy when even me, someone who hasn't lived in a world where these devices didn't exist, even I can see that it's a huge problem. Um, and so unfortunately, we are kind of running out of time.
Yes.
So just to kind of get through our last question, we have a lot of younger listeners and viewers and even older people, but what is one particular thing that you would love people to kind of take away from this conversation? Like one thing that you would love for them to remember?
That you have the power with your mindset, shifting your perspective to change your life, to create opportunities for yourself. And this can even start with something as simple as positive self talk. For instance, when you wake up in the morning, instead of looking at your phone and instead of saying, oh God, it's another day, and think of, oh my God, I'm not happy or this or that or all the things, I'm going to tell you, how you think affects what you do. So it's really hard for you to get out of bed when you're thinking like that. Instead, when you change your perspective and you shift how you talk to yourself and say, good morning, to yourself or whatever that works, it's another day. Like I get to wake up. I don't have any aches and pains. I get to see my friends today. I get to do whatever that thing is that you want to do. And when you change that way that you speak to yourself, it changes how you think, right? So that's that shift in your mindset. And I want everybody to know that they have the power to do this. That they're like, and if they just let go of those outside forces and they just focus on that, the power of your mindset is your superpower. You own that.
Yeah,
Nobody can take that away from you.
truly amazing. I think that's definitely something a lot of people need to remember, that things aren't just happening to you. You do have, a bit of control, that you can actually do something about things that are happening around you. So, can you please tell us where we can find more about you?
Yes, of course. So please feel free to reach out to me, Marjan at Future Colab or Marjan, Marjan at futrcolab.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to talk to you and see what you guys are up to.
All right, amazing. Thank you so much, Marjan.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure, Kai.